Hey guys, it is CC Garland here. I hope you're having a great day. Today, what we are going to talk about is virtually wholesaling. I'm going to provide a comprehensive overview of what virtual wholesaling is, how to get started, some difficulties with getting started, where to start, and also I'm going to talk about the compensation breakdown. What I mean by that is, if you're virtually wholesaling, you're going to need somebody on the ground to assist you. Now, you can structure this in multiple ways. I have used boots on the ground as well as actually joint venturing with partners in that particular market. So you just need to find the correct fit for you. I'll go over what those models look like as well as how to compensate your partners or your boots on the ground personnel for their time and effort. So let's go ahead and jump into the video. Virtual wholesaling is a process of contracting a property and wholesaling it in a market you physically aren't located in. So let me give you an example. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and I wholesale properties virtually in Charlotte, North Carolina. What does that mean? That means I physically never see the property. I never go to it. I do everything over the computer, hence the name virtually, and I use other people as well. So I'm distant from the property. Typically, virtual wholesaling refers to you being about more than an hour away from the property. If it's 30 minutes, I wouldn't really consider that. Usually an hour or more is virtual. You can actually treat your local market as a virtual market. I do that as well. So I try not to go out to view properties. I try not to personally be involved with the transaction coordination or the dispositions. Because the good thing about once you have this stood up is that you can replicate this anywhere. So even though I can go out and view properties, my process is so tight that I can essentially use the same model that I would use hundreds of miles away here locally in Charleston. So it works great. That's basically what virtual wholesaling is. I don't want to overcomplicate it. It's just basically you marketing to another location that you're not physically located in. So let's talk about why you would want to do this. You may say, hey, Cece, why in the world do I want to virtually wholesale? I hear people talking about it, but why do they do this? And I will actually tell you this. This reason number one right here is why I virtually wholesale. Because I'm in a small market. Charleston, South Carolina is really small compared to a lot of other markets out there. So compared to Charlotte's like 10 times as big population-wise as Charleston. What does this mean? This means if I were to use my special targeted list criteria here in Charleston, I may only get like 10,000 sellers I can actively market to. I may be able to use that same criteria in Charlotte or in Houston or in another large market and have 100,000 properties that I can target. That's a huge difference. So here in my hometown of Charleston, where I started wholesaling, it's a small market. Not rural or anything, but there's only so many places where investors want to buy. They don't really want to buy on the outskirts, going towards some of the more rural locations. So out of all the hot areas, there are only so many properties that fit my criteria that I want to pull. A lot of new development is happening here, and we don't want to focus on those properties. I want very blue collar properties, meaning they're built in 1985 and prior, and properties that also are underneath, let's just say $100,000 for the cash offer. I don't want new properties or anything like that. Also, too, my market has become very competitive, and my marketing dollars honestly go twice as far, if not 10 times as far in some other markets like Houston. I can use the same amount of marketing dollars, resources, and efforts in Charleston that I can in Houston and pick up deals a lot easier because the sellers aren't as resistant to sell. I can also make sure that I'm consistently marketing to leads because I already have so many I can target. In Charleston, it's a relatively small market. So in Houston, it's like the perfect place because there are just so many zip codes. There are so many properties to target. In Charleston here, with the growth that we've seen, people know what their properties are worth. In Houston, they know that their properties are a dime a dozen. If you're not going to buy their house, you'll just go and get another one, right? They know there's a ton of properties like theirs. In Charleston or some other competitive markets, I've encountered this in Fort Lauderdale. in Miami when I marketed there. Those homeowners like know what their houses are worth, and those are retirement communities as well. So people come to Charleston to retire. They go to Fort Lauderdale to retire. So they're in the most prime location. So why would they want to give up their house with little resistance? That's not the truth in a lot of other markets. So just keep that in mind. If you're in a situation where it seems like you're marketing to sellers and all of them just want a super high price for their house, or you're not getting any motivated sellers, say you market it to 10,000 and all of them just have such a high idea what their property is worth, and you look it up on Zillow and it's falling apart, guys, you probably want to look somewhere else. So if you're in an overly competitive market, I would go somewhere else because your cost per deal is going to be really high. So the goal isn't to, excuse my language here, get in a pissing competition with somebody else. You're not trying to see, oh, I can spend X amount of dollars. And the person says, I can spend twice as much as you. And you say, I can spend 3 times as much as you. You're not trying to do that. You're trying to go to markets where you can spend a reasonable amount of money. I'm not saying not spend anything, but a reasonable amount of money, say $2,000, and get a $10,000 deal. That's reasonable. There are plenty of markets out there. If your market isn't one of them, hey, let's look at some virtual markets. So in a minute, I will actually show you some places you can go ahead and start marketing to virtually and how you would go about locating a virtual market. So let's talk about some difficulties with wholesaling virtually. One of the biggest difficulties, guys, is there are a lot of moving components with virtual wholesaling deals. The reason being is because you're not only having to worry about things that are tangible, meaning the property itself, you're having to manage other things that may not be specifically known or important if you were in a physical market. So let me clarify that. What I mean by that is you're going to have to manage people a lot more, especially if you're just starting off with a partner in a virtual market, right? So if you're starting to market somewhere and you just picked up a joint venture partner or a boots on the ground person, in the back of your mind, you may be thinking, are these people really following up with my leads? All right. How do I know that they're not, contracting a deal at a certain price, marketing it up to a cash buyer, and on the HUD, one price is reflected, but that cash buyer may be giving them a kickback on the end of the deal outside of the HUD. How do I know that this person isn't going to take my deal and run away with it? Now, we don't want to have a scarcity mentality, but we want to be realistic as well. And I'll be honest, the more comfortable that you are with your partner or your boots on the ground in that market, the easier things are going to be, right? So if you are just starting in a virtual market and it's just you and you're trying to piece this thing together and you're the subject matter expert, it's going to be very difficult for you to hold this thing together. The first couple of deals are going to be a little bit tough. You're going to learn some lessons. You may lose out on some deals. Somebody may take a deal and close on it behind you, right? You can't help that. That's just part of the game. So I wouldn't have those things in the forefront of your mind and be thinking about those and discourage you from virtually wholesaling. It just happens. It has happened to me. And if you have any intention on staying around for a considerable amount of time in wholesaling, hopefully not, but it most likely will happen to you. So just remember that and keep that in mind. One thing we also need to understand, guys, is we need to have an in-depth understanding of wholesaling. So I'll give you guys an example. You're going to have to teach other people on your process, and they're going to be looking to you because most likely they haven't virtually wholesaled, especially if you're virtually wholesaling with somebody who is going to be your boots on the ground and a partner. Say they're handling the phone calls. They're going to be looking to you for guidance. So you have to really be on your P's and Q's and know what you're doing in order to give them guidance. You can't just say, oh, I'm handling the marketing and you do everything else. They're going to be leaning on you for a little bit of assistance. And I'll tell you why. If you go out and you find somebody who already has a full-blown investment operation up and running, what's the benefit of them splitting 50% with you? They're probably already marketing to the same list. and they probably have a team already built out to handle all these things that you want them to do. So really, they're going to be outsourcing the stuff that you want to outsource. So if you say, hey, I want you to handle acquisitions, they're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. You handle acquisitions. And so nobody's bringing value to the table. So you don't want somebody who's considerably ahead of you in that market, because you look at it at that point and you say, okay, well, what's the benefit of us both doing this together? We might as well just have our own companies. You need to find somebody who essentially compensates for your weaknesses. So I'm not talking about just partnering with a newbie if you're a newbie, but you can partner with somebody who's been in the game probably for like 6 months, close 5-6 deals. That's fine. That's like what most of my joint venture partners usually start out as. And then once I come in, they really grow because they're able to see what I'm doing and I'm bringing the marketing to the table, and they're able to just shine because they themselves are acquisitions people and they just needed leads in order to target and in order to close on. So just keep that in mind. You really need to have somebody you can trust there, but also not somebody who's really far advanced than you, because you're not going to be bringing any value and you're just going to be looking like, honestly, a newbie looking to leech onto them, especially if you're sort of new in real estate. So in most of my partnerships, I'm the subject matter expert. This also helps me too, because I'm able to structure my joint venture partnerships in ways that are more advantageous to me, meaning I can outsource more. So the more knowledge and more value that you're bringing to the table, the higher percentage that you can take while doing less. Keep that in mind. So I hate to say this aphorism, but knowledge is power. And that is so true when it comes to virtual wholesaling. If you know how to generate leads, if you have the knowledge, if you know the process, if you have buyers, that is very powerful. So those are a little bit of the difficulties with getting started with virtually wholesaling. It's just finding the right personnel and a lack of control. I'm telling you this, one of the most uncomfortable things is to be part of a wholesale deal that's hundreds of miles away, multiple state lines over, and you're about to close and you just get this funny feeling that you're not like in the loop. Let me give you an example. If you are like not on an email chain and you haven't received the HUD, the paralegal's talking to your joint venture partner and the buyer and not you, guys, that makes me very, very nervous, because before closing, that's the last thing you want. You want to make sure that you're squared away with. So we always want to get the HUD. We always want to make sure that we are being proactive, not reactive. Don't just take somebody else's word for it that you're going to get paid. You have to see the HUD. You have to be in the loop with the paralegal, get the contact information of the paralegal, make sure that your name is on the assignment contract or joint venture contract, whatever your joint venture partner is using, and make sure that you are on top of everything. So after I've closed several deals and built up rapport and built up a relationship with my joint venture partners, I know that they can handle everything. I don't have to stay on top of them. But the first couple of months, even if you're working on the first deal, that could be a little bit shaky. So just remember, be a control freak. It's fine. You're going to need that when you virtually wholesale, and that is good. If you get a gut feeling that something's off, I'm telling you, follow that gut feeling. If the paralegal isn't communicating with you, hey, blow that paralegal up, blow the attorney up, see what's going on with your deal. Because the worst thing that can happen is your name isn't on the HUD and they didn't get your wiring instructions. Next thing you know, the funds are dispersed and you're having to go back and track people for payment. You can pretty much count that as a loss, as you're not going to get paid. So your joint venture partner is not going to look out for you. You got to look out for you. So let's talk about where to start, guys. The first thing you want to do is analyze your market. I know I harp on this a lot, and it's really important, guys. So you want to make sure you're targeting locations that have a surplus and a large amount of blue collar properties. So those are properties that were built in the 1980s, that were purchased before year 2000 that need some repair work. The people have owned them for about 20 or 30 years. You want a large inventory of those properties. I'm not talking about 2, 3, 4, 5K properties. If you're going to virtually wholesale, do it big, right? It's the same as if it's an hour away, as if it's 10 hours away. The process is the same. You can't pick up and just go to the property in a day's drive. I mean, maybe you can fly there, but that's not efficient and that's not a replicable business model, right? You can't take that from market to market. If you're going to virtually wholesale and you're not seeing a good market within an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours away from your target market or the market you're currently located in, hey, go a couple state lines over. The great thing about this is that you can go anywhere, literally. And with the power of text message marketing, you physically don't have to be there. You physically don't have to use a mail house. You physically don't have to have a P.O. box that goes back to an address inside of the state. So there's really nothing stopping you from getting started and really just doing this thing big, regardless of where you're located. The biggest thing is research. And I know a lot of people ask me, where do they start? How do they pick a market? And I think a lot of people are overwhelmed by this. So I would suggest, hey, starting in your local state or within about 3 hours away from you. I can pretty much guarantee, unless you're in the middle of nowhere in North or South Dakota, no offense to people there, but I don't think it's a huge investment location in those states. So I guess I could talk about those without anybody being offended. But unless you're in like those states, usually within 2 to 3 hours, you'd be able to find a market that is thriving and that doesn't have a lot of competition. So let's go ahead and go to my zip code analysis sheet here, and I'll show you some markets that you can target. And I will show you examples of, if I'm in a particular market, why I would go somewhere else. So here's this zip code analysis sheet, and you guys should have access to this in the group. If not, I will post a link below this video and you guys can view it. But I pretty much looked at and analyzed all the major markets inside the United States right now. There are some missing, but all these places are good starting points. And if you're in Austin, let's just say you're in Texas, and you're like, man, cash sales here, 49, 124. This median sales price seems a little bit high. 138 cash sales. And we're not really seeing a lot of zip codes with cash sales over, let's just say 60 or 70, let alone 100. You may say, okay, I'd like to target Austin, but I heard it's really competitive. I heard that a lot of the properties here are newer and, there's not a lot of blue collar properties to target. And actually in Austin too, that's sort of true. I mean, it's seeing a lot of development. Austin's pretty big, but pretty much all the properties have been bought and renovated or torn down, and they are having some new construction there. So if I were in Austin, I would look somewhere like in Houston. I would say, okay, I'm starting off on a budget. My marketing dollars are a little bit low. I want the path of least resistance. What is that? Do you think a path of least resistance will be a zip code with 487 cash sales with a median sale price of $185,000, or targeting somewhere in Austin with 49 cash sales with a median sales price of $247K? Think about that. Let's just look at cash sales. Do you think you will have better luck targeting this zip code with 49 cash sales, or the top zip code in Houston with 487 cash sales? This right here tells me Houston is booming, and it tells me that there is more than enough opportunity for everybody. Look at these cash sales. So you have 487 potential buyers to choose from if you have a property that have bought in the last year, opposed to 49 or 124. So these cash buyers here are out. They're out here and they want properties. And they're targeting areas too where the median sales price is pretty low, 185, 158, 185. This is good to see, right? Because you want this below the national average. Now, I made a whole nother video on how I analyze zip codes, so I don't want to go too in depth here. However, this is where I would start. I would analyze the market and I would see, okay, what's near me? Am I in Austin? Have I not been getting that much success in Austin? Maybe I should try Houston, right? So here in Charleston, I went and I tried Charlotte. All of these highlighted zip codes are zip codes I identified as being very targeted and fitting my criteria. So there are a lot more highlighted properties here than in Charleston. And I don't even think I have the Charleston one on here because I'm pretty familiar with my market, but there are a lot more properties to choose from and a surplus. Now, pro tip, guys, I would say this: if you're trying to choose a virtual market, think about the areas that have professional sports teams. Think about those areas and those cities. If there's a professional sports team there, specifically football, baseball, or basketball, that's probably a good area to target. I'll tell you why. These people in these franchises that look to move these franchises to these cities do a lot of research. And you have to think, what's the typical type of person that will go to a football game or will go to a basketball game or an MLB game? I think of a good old-fashioned, hardworking American, blue collar, working a day job at a factory or something like that, some type of blue collar job. And they have a house that's, brick with a brick facade, American flag up front, no HOA, no sidewalks, but just well-kept community, but the houses are a little bit older. That's what I think, that's just an everyday type American house. So these people target those type of people. They're the type of people that go to those games. So if you're following what they're doing, most likely you're in an area that has a large blue collar population. So that can help you out a little bit. Just follow the places that have professional sports teams. And then you can drill down and do your zip code analysis to figure out which ones you should specifically target after that. So analyzing the market, that is key. So don't try to overcomplicate this or make this into something that it's not. You're not going to go wrong if you're finding a market that has a lot of cash sales. So you can be just as successful in Charlotte as you can in Houston. Or hey, guess what? You can even target both of them. So that's a good thing about virtually wholesaling. You don't have to be restricted by where you can target. So if one area isn't really producing the results that you want, you can simply just go to another one. So the next thing we want to do, guys, is determine our virtual wholesaling business structure. What do I mean by this? Before you start, you're going to have to determine, what am I going to do? Am I going to handle marketing? Am I going to handle marketing and acquisitions? I'm going to handle acquisitions and dispositions. Am I just going to handle marketing? Do I just want somebody to be my boots on the ground to take pictures for me? Right? So this is up to you. I highly suggest on focusing on your strengths and outsourcing your weaknesses. Typically, you're going to handle the marketing, right? It wouldn't really make sense for you to go to somebody and tell them, hey, do you want a joint venture? And they're in that market, and most likely they're going to have buyers. So I would say you're automatically going to handle marketing. You can handle acquisitions if you want. So in some of my markets, actually most of them, my joint venture partners handle the acquisitions of the property. Maybe you guys want to focus on those things separately, but focus on dispositions jointly. So your joint venture partner is handling the acquisitions. He's calling the leads. He's contracting the deals. And you guys are focused collectively on moving the deals. So that's another way that you can structure it. For me in particular, I have my joint venture partners handle everything from acquisitions to contract negotiations to contracting the properties to dispositions, meaning finding the buyer, transaction coordination. I'm only handling the marketing. However, in some markets, you could get away with that depending on your experience level. But for some people that are just starting out, you might want to do a little bit more, especially if you're looking to the other party for guidance. So you guys can talk about that. There's multiple ways to structure this. Now, you can also have a boots on the ground person where only thing that they're doing is going out and taking pictures for the property or putting a lockbox on the door or being your eyes and ears. Basically, if you need something done that you can't do virtually, like on the computer, they're going to be your person to handle it. It's great to have somebody just on tap where you're like, man, I can call John, and I know in a moment's notice, John will go out there and he'll throw a lockbox on the property, or he'll go get the contract addendum signed, or anything like that. Anything that has to be done virtually. You can have this person file your memorandum of contracts. So you could either pay them flat at closing if they're going to be doing a lot of stuff for you, or you just pay them $50 every time they need to do a task. You don't want to skimp on these things, guys. You don't want to not pay them justly. And I'm going to go into that right now. So for your boots on the ground, guys, I pay them $50. And you don't want to tell them, hey, $25 or $20, or don't go cheap, guys. Because if you go cheap, the less quality of work you're going to get, and these people aren't going to make it a priority to do these things. So just sweeten the pot a little bit. If you have some experience, you can also offer to educate them if they want to start wholesaling. However, I have had people that literally just told me their only goal they want to do in real estate is just locate properties for me and be a bird dog. Even better. That's great, because then I don't have to worry about any competition. So make sure you're paying these guys $50 or above, and make sure you're paying them every time they go out to the property. You can negotiate if they have to go out to their a couple times or several times during one transaction, but just make sure you're compensating them fairly. Now, what I do is I have a joint venture split, 50-50 split. So what you want to realize here too is you want to pay these people fairly. So think, if you're like, man, I want to take home 70% and pay somebody 30% that's on the ground, who's the acquisitions person and who may be finding the buyers for you, think about if they're going to prioritize their leads. If they have their own lead generation going and they're able to get 100% of those deals, and then you're telling them you'll get 30%, and yet you want to take up 100% of their time, the likelihood of them being motivated to tackle your leads is little to none. They're going to put them on the back burner. A 50-50 split is what I found motivates people enough, because even though they're getting paid 50%, it seems fair, right? So even though I'm not doing 50% of the work, I may be doing 10% of the work, but bringing a lot more value in my knowledge of real estate, in my marketing list, and my skip tracing, in my text message marketing, but I'm physically not doing the work. They actually feel like that's fair because it's a 50-50 split. They feel like even if I may not be doing everything, like going out to the properties and stuff, they feel like I value them enough to be an even partner. So this is more psychological right here versus based on how much work is being done. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be equal as to what work's being done, but it can be equal as to the value that you're providing. If you're knowledgeable and you're an expert in marketing like I am, and you're bringing that to the table, and this other person has been hanging bandit signs and they've been doing direct mail and they have not been getting any results, then you have immense value that you're bringing. So one thing to keep in mind is all about value, not work. So with this, you also want the person to have skin in the game. So they don't have a free ride here. So if you are paying for marketing costs, you can either ask them for half, or you can pay for it up front, but deduct that amount after your first deal. So if you spend $1,000 to get your first deal, you guys close it, take $1,000 out for yourself, and then you'll split $9,000. Most people will think that's pretty reasonable, but I've been part of too many wholesaling partnerships, joint venture partnerships, and virtual wholesaling partnerships where I have not had the other person have skin in the game, and they literally just ignore my leads. And I was paying them a fair percentage, 50%, 60% sometimes. So you always want people to have skin in the game. One way to sort of get around somebody just fumbling your leads is getting to know them. There is no shortcut to this. So we want to make sure that we are forming a relationship with your joint venture partner and then moving on to the partnership. Too many people want to just rush into this thing. Make sure you know yourself, know your strengths and weaknesses, and know the other person as well. So you're not at night worrying about, man, am I going to get paid on this deal? Michael didn't message me back. He's ignoring my text. He may not be ignoring them. He may have just been busy, but things start going through your mind and you're thinking this person might be cutting you out of the deal. All that just goes away by forming a relationship. So the more strong of a bond you have with that person, let's just say you talk on the phone. You guys bounce ideas off of each other. You mastermind it together. You hopped on a Zoom call. Very important. See the person you're working with. Put a face to the name. See, all of those things make it so much easier for you to get to closing and for you to work with a long-time joint venture partner. So this is an overview of what I would do if I were starting to virtually wholesale, guys. It's a pretty comprehensive overview, and I know I went over a lot, but these are the basics, and this is the foundation of it. Always remember, when you're starting something, it's going to be a little bit difficult to start. However, the higher barrier to entry and the more difficult it is, this means that the next guy isn't going to take those steps that you did to move forward. So it's a little bit difficult, but you would see so many more deals come through, so many more contracts, and you can start forming a business. This forces you to form a business. It's not a hustle at this point. Once you lose out on a deal, once you miss out on some money on an assignment contract, you're going to be forced to put systems in place because you don't want it to happen again. So you may not realize it, but over time, subconsciously, even though it's not physically written down, but subconsciously and in your mind, you're forming systems. And that's only going to make your physical market a lot better and a lot stronger. So I hope this helps out, guys. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to message me. I look forward to putting out some more content for you guys. I hope you guys have a great day.